Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today on Ranking Doctor Who by Decade, we are looking at the Cybermen stories. So we are going to be ranking Doctor Who from worst to best by decade on the strength of their Cybermen stories. Now, like the video with the Daleks, we're going to leave the 90s out of this because I'm not looking at Big Finish or books. I'm just going by TV stuff, and the Cybermen aren't in the TV movie. So we're going to be looking at the 60s, 70s, 80s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s. So we have 6 places, and at the bottom is the 2020s. Now, it's not all bad. I really like The Haunting of Villa Diodati, or however you say it. I thought it's a really good episode. I love what they do with the lone Cyberman. I love how it's kind of breathed some fresh air into the Cybermen who have historically not been done very well in modern Who, in my opinion. So the guy playing Ashard is really good, and Ashard is such a cool concept and character that I really wish we'd gotten more of him, while at the same time thinking we got too much of him because I didn't like him in Power of the Doctor. He felt shoehorned in. But the original version of him I wish we'd gotten more of because he was a really cool idea. And Ascension of the Cybermen I can enjoy as well, but they kind of ruin all that with Timeless Children, which is bad on so many levels. But partially just because, once again, it craps all over the Cybermen, makes them subservient to the Master, makes them just an army of goons, creates the Cyber Time Lords, which we also have to deal with in Power of the Doctor. And I like Power of the Doctor, but I don't like the Cybermen back, or the Cyber Time Lords back in Power of the Doctor. So they just feel like fodder. So even though it's got some good stuff it's doing with them, it's doing a lot of bad with them too. In 5th place is the 2010s. Again, aside from World Enough and Time, which is the only reason this isn't at the bottom, the 2010s doesn't really use the Cybermen well. I'm trying to remember what all they're even in. I know they're in Closing Time, which is okay in places, but not the Cybermen aspect, aside from that opening part before the credits that's really good. I think they show up in, like, with some of the other villains in, like, you know, the Big Bang and all that. They're just kind of there because, hey, we have Cybermen costumes, throw people in them. Or the scene when the one's trying to assimilate Amy because only its cybernetic components are left. That's actually kind of creepy. Nightmare in Silver is okay. Like, I don't think it's bad. It's the one I always forget about in 7B. I talk about Series 7B a bit because I find it underrated, but I always forget about Nightmare in Silver. I never think to mention it. It's fine, though. I think Matt Smith's putting in a good double performance. But World Enough and Time gets them pretty right. Now, The Doctor Falls doesn't quite live up to that. It's fine. But it still doesn't quite live up to what World Enough and Time sets up, because the threat of the Cybermen approaching looms over that whole episode. It very much is like the Cybermen's version of Genesis of the Daleks, where the threat of them coming looms over it. I just feel like they're underutilized here, and a lot of their episodes are average at best. I'm trying to remember, they probably have more episodes in the decade I just can't think of because they're not that memorable. In 4th place is the 2000s. Again, underutilized. Really, they have their opening story, the Age of Steel and the Rise of the Cybermen. That's pretty good. It's a nice alternate universe origin story for the Cybermen to explain why they have a different design. I like that. They're used okay in the Doomsday 2-parter. Not very well in the Next Doctor, even though I enjoy that story. They're not really utilized well in it. Again, they feel more like generic army robot soldiers. They don't feel like Cybermen most of the time. I feel like Modern Who really struggles to get the Cybermen right. And that's why the bottom spots are all Modern Who and the top spots are all Classic Who. At number 3 in 3rd place is the 70s. And of course, this is based on Revenge of the Cybermen, as that's really the only story we get. I like Revenge of the Cybermen. It's probably the most underrated Classic Who story. And I really like Season 12 a lot as a whole. Revenge is really good. I love that Cybermen design. I love the fact that the Cybermen feel like a threat. They're not beholden to anyone. They're not subservient to anyone. They're their own people. They have a plan. They're trying to destroy a world that was a threat to them in a previous war. Yes, the The vulnerability to gold is a little weird, but I love their design of their outfits. I love the guy playing the lead one is doing a good job. I love the smack Tom Baker talks. I love the location filming in the caves. I love the B plot with the political stuff going on with the Vogons. It's a really good story. I mean, the Cybermen feel like primary villains here much better than they ever really do in modern Who. So even if you're not a fan of Revenge of the Cybermen, I think you would at least concede that the Cybermen are done better in this story than most of modern Who. Maybe not all, close to all, but most of modern Who, where they tend to be generic robot monsters subservient to the master or something. But yeah, that's the only reason. That's the reason why it's not any higher. Is it is just based on Revenge, and because of that, it doesn't have any bad stories that decade. It just has one what I consider to be really good story. Now, in second place is the 80s. The Cybermen made a huge comeback in the 80s. I like all of their stories. Earthshock is probably the best one. I love Earthshock. The reveal at the end of episode 1 that the Cybermen are back is fantastic. I love their redesign. The 80s Cybermen look so good. The helmets, the bodysuits, I really, really like that. Earthshock is a classic for a reason. It has a very epic feel to it. They play a really big part in the Five Doctors, which I like. The location work with them looks really good. Looking forward to seeing it in the anniversary box set, the 20th anniversary box set. The Attack of the Cybermen. I really like Attack of the Cybermen. I finally got to watch it for the first time when the box set came out, and I liked it. I've noticed people either seem to really like it or really not. I really liked it. It does have a lot. It is very lore heavy. So if you don't know the lore, you could get a little lost. I get that. But I figure most of us watching it know the lore. And it's nice that there's some continuity there. I enjoyed that a lot, actually. Really good story, really dark, but really good. And even Silver Nemesis I like. It's the weakest of the 80s stories. And I've only watched it once, and it's been a while. It is one of those that needs a rewatch. It's actually on the Amazon wish list, I believe. Because I do need to rewatch that. But I enjoyed the one time I've seen it. I felt it wasn't as good as Remembrance. It's like a weaker generic version of Remembrance. But it was still underrated, I think, for how it's normally perceived to be. But the Cybermen had a really strong presence in the 80s, and they always felt like a real threat. Even in the Five Doctors, where they're not the primary threat, they feel like an actual threat. Far more, again, than Modern Who usually does with them. And and number one on the list is the 60s. I mean, this is just the decade for the Cybermen. I mean, they are kind of Troughton's main villains since the Daleks kind of took a 5-year hiatus. And most of the stories are pretty good. I haven't seen The Wheel in Space, but I've also been told it's the weakest of the 60s stories. 10th Planet is good, especially the first 2 episodes. They're phenomenal. Episodes 3 and 4 aren't as good, but 1 and 2 are phenomenal. I love the Mondasian Cybermen design from 10th Planet. That is hands down the creepiest Cybermen design we have ever gotten. I absolutely adore it. It fits black and white so well. We have the Moon Base, which I really like. My personal favorite animation that we've gotten so far is the animation for the Moon Base. I love the story. I don't really care for the Cybermen design and the cyber voices in them, but it's a really good story. We have Tomb, which I find a little overrated, which is probably just because it's complete. But it's still a good story. It's nice to be able to watch a complete Troughton story. And I still don't like the Cybermen design, but it has some really iconic shots in it, like the Daleks waking up from their tomb, and it's a good story. And then we have The Invasion, which is just phenomenal. I absolutely love The Invasion. I love, again, the outfits they wear in the Invasion. The Revenge of the Cybermen Invasion Cybermen costumes are my favorites. They just look iconic and so good to me. The location work of them walking around the town and coming out of the sewers is so iconic. You got one of the best human villains in Vaughn, a great human villain in Packard. Everybody's getting stuff to do. You have a nice guest cast. You have Unit showing up for the first time, Benton showing up for the first time. Lethbridge Stewart back again for his second appearance, the first time as the Brigadier, as he's been promoted to Brigadier here. And it's another one of those stories, I think it being in black and white really helps it. It just has this nice atmosphere into it, much like The Web of Fear does. Really, really good story. I definitely got to give the number one spot to the 60s. So I want to know what you think of my ranking and how you would rank the Cybermen by decade or Doctor Who by decade on the Cybermen stories. Other things to do. Don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button. That helps me out. I certainly appreciate it. I am trying to reach 1,000 subscribers in 2023, the anniversary year, and we are well on our way to that. So I certainly appreciate everyone who has subscribed and everyone who watches. I also have a Patreon. If you would like to help that way, that does help me keep the bills paid. Inflation is crazy, isn't it? There's a link to that down in the description below. My entry level tier is only $2 a month. I want to give a shout out to some of my top tier patrons, Stephen Crane, Colin Coney, and Finn Perkins. I appreciate their support, as I do the support of all of my patrons. It does make a difference. I also have, excuse me, I also have a P.O. box if there's anything you'd like to send me to look at and review. And a link to my Amazon wish list, which I do believe has Silver Nemesis and Greatest Show on it, is down there as well. Most importantly, thank you for watching. Hey, hey, the camera's on. Face hasn't started itching every time. I'm sure I'll start coughing immediately.